She was just the cook until the day everything changed. A single decision, made in the heat of a moment, turned her from an invisible worker into a symbol of courage no one could ignore. It wasn't on a battlefield that she showed her bravery, nor in a speech before the powerful, but in the quiet defiance of conscience over command. Sometimes, the greatest battles are not fought with weapons, but with the strength to say no when everyone else remains silent. There are moments in history when ordinary people become extraordinary not because they wanted to, but because circumstances demanded it. The cook in this story lived her life in the background, cooking for soldiers, serving meals, and watching the war unfold from the edges. She had no rank, no authority, and no ambition for power. But deep inside, she carried something far more powerful than rank, a moral compass that would not bend, even when the highest authority demanded it. Her story reminds us that true leadership does not always wear stars on its shoulders, sometimes it wears an apron, stained with the evidence of hard work and quiet resilience. Her defiance began with something that seemed small. The general, a man used to absolute obedience, gave her an order that crossed the boundary between duty and conscience. It wasn't about food that day. It was about something darker. He wanted her to serve a meal to prisoners in a way that humiliated them, to make an example of them before the troops. To him, it was a display of control, a way to enforce discipline. To her, it was cruelty disguised as command. She looked at those men, weak and broken, and saw human beings, not enemies. And when she refused, the silence in that kitchen was heavier than any weapon drawn. In that moment, she taught the world that the line between obedience and morality is one that every person must face alone. Refusing a direct order was no small act. It was an act that could cost her freedom or even her life. But what made her decision powerful was not rebellion, it was integrity. She understood that following orders without question might keep her safe, but it would destroy her humanity. That moment reminds us all of a deeper truth. Authority may demand obedience, but conscience demands courage. Every society, every organization, and every individual faces that tension at some point. The true measure of character lies in how we respond when doing the right thing comes with a price. Her refusal spread through the camp like wildfire. Some called her foolish, others whispered her name with quiet respect. Soldiers who had long buried their own doubts began to question what they had accepted as normal. Her act was a mirror held up to the system, forcing everyone to see what they had become. It is often said that one voice cannot change much, but in reality, one act of integrity can ignite a chain reaction that exposes the truth. The cook's courage reminded everyone that justice often starts with one small act of refusal. As days passed, her life changed completely. She was punished, isolated, and treated as a traitor. Yet, what the general could not understand was that punishment only made her message stronger. Her silence in confinement spoke louder than any speech could. She had lost her position, but gained something far greater, the respect of those who saw in her the reflection of their own suppressed humanity. History has often celebrated generals and kings, but it is people like her, hidden behind uniforms or aprons, who truly shape the moral core of a nation. Her defiance became a story told in whispers, a story that outlived the orders of men and the noise of war. This story teaches us about the immense power of conscience. We live in a world where obedience is often rewarded, and questioning is seen as defiance. But progress has never come from blind obedience, it has always come from those willing to challenge what is wrong, even at personal cost. The cook did not seek to challenge authority for the sake of rebellion. She did it because she believed in the dignity of human life. Her act is a lesson that conscience is not a luxury, it is the foundation of moral civilization. Without it, humanity becomes mechanical, emotionless, and hollow. Her courage also reveals the quiet strength of women throughout history who stood their ground in worlds built to silence them. She had no weapon, no political power, yet her stance shook the command structure built on fear. Every woman who has ever said no to injustice carries that same spirit. The cook's story is a tribute to those unseen heroes who refuse to let power dictate their sense of right and wrong. It reminds us that courage has no uniform, no gender, and no title, it simply has conviction. When we look deeper, her story also challenges how we define leadership. The general commanded with authority, yet he ruled through fear. The cook, on the other hand, led through moral strength. One used power to control, the other used character to inspire. Leadership born of fear fades when the threat disappears, but leadership born of principle endures long after the moment has passed. The general's orders were forgotten with time, but her act of conscience became legend. That is the legacy of true leadership, the kind that changes not just actions, but hearts. Finally, her refusal speaks to all of us about the courage to stand alone. It is easy to follow the crowd, easy to stay silent when wrong things happen around us, easy to say, "It's not my place." But real change begins the moment someone decides that silence is no longer an option. Every generation needs people like her, people who will put values above convenience, who will speak when others whisper, and who will stand firm when fear demands surrender. Her refusal may have begun as a small act of defiance, but it became a timeless lesson in moral strength and human dignity. When we think of her story today, we are reminded that greatness does not always come from victory, it often comes from sacrifice. The cook's courage teaches that one act of conscience can ripple through time, inspiring countless others to do what is right, even when it costs them everything. She was just the cook, yes, but through her refusal, she became the soul of a moral awakening. And in that awakening, we find the heart of what it truly means to be human.